As CivilNet continues its series of interviews in the run-up to the Turkish general elections on Sunday, I'm joined again by Aras Editor-in-Chief Rober Koptaş. Today we look at the HDP, the Kurdish voter bloc in Turkey, and how Turkey's Armenian community perceives them. So, Mr. Koptaş, thanks again for your time.
Hi, Emilio. Thanks from me.
So, Mr. Koptaş, we've looked at President Erdoğan, we've looked at the CHP-led opposition coalition led by Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu. But what about the third force in Turkish politics, that of the HDP and its umbrella, which has been the third force in the last few elections in Turkey? The HDP will not be fielding a presidential candidate and has endorsed Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu. It will, however, run separate lists in the parliamentary elections. So even though the leadership has endorsed the traditional Kemalist CHP leadership, what is the average Kurd living in, let's say, Diyarbakir saying about this decision, about this endorsement of the CHP?
Yes, before the last events, before Kılıçdaroğlu's candidacy, there was a huge gap between CHP, the Republicans and Kurdish movement and Kurdish people mostly, because CHP was a so-called, let's say, social democrat, but in fact a very nationalist and statist movement, a party. And since Kurds were demanding their ethnic rights, their language rights, cultural rights, CHP was always reactive about these demands. But after some changes in these last 3-4 years, and especially after his candidacy, Kılıçdaroğlu tried to close that gap between his party and Kurdish movement. So now, especially after the terrible last maybe 10 years of the rule of Erdoğan and his pressure to the Kurdish movements, and especially HDP's leader is Selahattin Demirtas is in the prison for now 6 years. Most of the Kurds are siding with CHP, and since Kılıçdaroğlu has a Dersim, Tunceli, Alevi route, and he knows the region very well, he can give the image and he can create a discourse to achieve a peace between Turkish and Kurdish people. So he can be a good bridge between the traditional social democrats, nationalists, and traditional state, Turkish state, and today's Kurdish movement. So most of the Kurds, as you said, an ordinary Kurd from Diyarbakir or one now have a very good and positive emotions about Kılıçdaroğlu, I think. And the polls are showing that most of the Kurds who vote for HDP, maybe 70% of them are going to vote for Kılıçdaroğlu.
Okay, I mean, what do the Armenians in Turkey think, or how do they perceive the HDP? Many of our watchers will know the Armenian deputy of the Turkish Grand National Assembly, Mr. Garo Paylan. But Mr. Paylan will not be running in these elections. He's no longer a candidate. He was sitting on HDP benches, but was he termed out? Are there other Armenians perhaps on the parliamentary lists? And what would be your general comments about the Armenian community's perception of the HDP?
First of all, I must say that Kurdish and Armenian relationship has a long history. And unfortunately, there are some moments that, of course, these two nations live side by side and politically they come together. But these are few. Unfortunately, the bitter side of the relationship and history is more. So there are always some troubles between Kurdish political movements and Armenians because they were living side by side, and Ottoman state or sometimes Kurdish state, Turkish state used Kurds against Armenians. So the history is a little bit complex, and as I said, bitter sides are maybe more than the sweet side. So, but HDP achieved lots of things. As you said, it created an umbrella for the opposition, an umbrella for the it's mostly Kurdish, it's a mostly Kurdish movement, but for ethnic or religious groups or some leftist socialist groups, some NGOs, LGBTI movements, they are involved in HDP politics. So Garo Paylan was one of the best results of this organic relationship between Armenians and Kurdish movement, HDP. He achieved lots of things, and he was a very good example of how a deputy can be. He was very hardworking. For me, he always reminded me Krikor Zorab, the Ottoman Armenian parliamentarian who speak about all the problems in the Ottoman Empire. Unfortunately, he was killed, but he was a good historical example. Garo Paylan was followed that path. So he created a big impact. He's a very well-known deputy in Turkish parliament, and he is very respected. The problem is HDP has a quota for two terms. Every deputy can be a candidate for 2 terms. There can be some extensions for only the leaders of the party. So since Garo Paylan is a good example, I know that from the inside they offered a candidacy from Ankara, but he refused it. So I can feel that there is a problem. Paylan demanded to run for a third term, but not from he cannot get a result for where he demanded from. Of course, this created a problem, and some of the Armenians and some of the non-Armenians are very critical of HDP that they are not showing an Armenian candidate for the National Assembly. But I know that after Garo Paylan's refusal, the party offered a women Armenian candidate. But this was a last-minute thing, and some of the candidates' possible names rejected the party. And I think that since Kurdish movement is under threat, there is lots of pressure, and there was some dangers to go along with that party. Maybe some of that candidates had afraid that they can face a problem. So at the end, the result is not very good, but I can say that the relationship between Armenians and most of the Armenians and HDP is now good. A group of Armenian youth, Nor Zartong, is in HDP. Some other Armenian members are always backing or working for HDP. Personally, I'm a voter for HDP because I believe that Kurdish issue is a very crucial and very important problem in Turkey. And without solving that problem, Turkey cannot reach a real democracy. So the solution of Kurdish problem in Turkey will help all other ethnic groups and all other democratization problems in the country. With this perspective, some of the Armenians, and I believe they are not few, are going way with HDP. Even if there can be some problems, last-minute problems, as I explained, but I know that Garo personally will continue in HDP as well.
Okay, well, as always, Mr. Koptaş, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you can continue following our series of interviews on CivilNet with Mr. Koptaş. Even though the vote is on Sunday, we will continue these interviews into next week to unpack the aftermath. Thank you for joining us on CivilNet.